I'd come off 2 back operations that year.
Yeah,
so
really,
I
wow.
only played a dozen games, but I was back for the back end of the year. Yeah. And there, 16 minutes in, I'd knocked out, completely knocked out. And I'm still to this day, fuck, did that happen?
Yeah.
The truth is, the image most people carry of Danny Buderus is not the premiership. It is not the 15 times he captained New South Wales or the 2 decades of excellence that made him the heartbeat of the Newcastle Knights. The image most people carry is a stretcher, a neck brace, a stadium going completely silent, a man being wheeled away in the final game of his career, unconscious before his body even hit the ground. There were suspensions before that night. There was a World Cup ban. There was a coach he fell out with, and a body held together by surgery and sheer stubbornness. And if you think Danny Buderus deserved more recognition than he ever got, hit that hype button right now and give this video some hype. Tell the algorithm this story is worth telling, because we are going to break down the full timeline, the real flashpoints behind the headlines, and what people always got wrong about one of the greatest players this game has produced. Now, number 9, September 2013, Allianz Stadium, the Newcastle Knights versus the Sydney Roosters in a preliminary final. Danny Buderus had made it public. This was his last season, his final shot at going out on top. He had pushed through 2 back surgeries earlier that same year. His neck had bulging discs. His lower back was inflamed. The medical staff knew it. His teammates knew it. And still, he laced up his boots one more time and let his side out. 17 minutes in, Roosters prop Jared Waerea-Hargreaves was building momentum and charging hard at the Knights' defensive line. Buderus spotted him, and he did exactly what he had done thousands of times throughout his career. He went straight at him, ball and all, head on, full commitment. That was the way he had always played. But this time, the margin was wrong. His head made contact with the forearm or bicep of Waerea-Hargreaves at full speed. The impact knocked Buderus out cold before he even reached the ground. He lay on the turf for nearly 3 minutes. The crowd stood. Nobody sat down. Nobody made a sound. People in the stands were watching and praying and waiting. Then came the Medicab, the neck brace, the slow, terrible journey off the field, while 15,000 people gave him a standing ovation, each one quietly understanding they were watching his last moment as a professional footballer. He was taken to St. Vincent's Hospital. Scans cleared him of a fractured neck but found heavy inflammation around a disc that had already been operated on that same year. Knights CEO Matt Gidley stood in the dressing room afterwards, unable to hide his emotion, saying it was sad to see a legend finish like that. The Knights lost 40 points to 14. It was over. That collision was not where this story begins. It was where it ends. To understand how Buderus arrived at that moment on that stretcher, you have to go back almost 30 years to a 16-year-old kid from Taree who just wanted to play for his favourite club. Number 8. Here is the paradox at the heart of this story. Ask anyone who played alongside Danny Buderus or went up against him week after week, and they use the same word: fair. He was known as one of the fairest competitors the NRL had ever seen, the nicest bloke off the field, a man who played hard and clean and almost never gave the judiciary any reason to know his name. He was a captain who commanded respect in every dressing room he entered, a leader who made the people around him better without demanding the credit for it. And yet, when you look closely at his career, you find suspensions, a World Cup ban, a bitter club departure, and a career-ending hit that still gets debated today. How does one of the cleanest players in the game end up with all of this attached to his name? That is exactly what we are going to work through, because the truth is more layered than any headline ever captured. Number 7, it almost did not happen at all. If not for one of the most embarrassing scouting errors in rugby league history, Danny Buderus might have spent his entire career at St. George and never worn a Knights jersey. In 1994, Buderus was 16 years old and playing for the Taree Red Rovers. He was a St. George Dragons supporter. That was the club he grew up following, and the Dragons wanted him. Peter O'Sullivan, one of the most respected recruitment managers the game has ever produced, and the same man who would later identify Cameron Smith and Greg Inglis, was sent to Kogara's Jubilee Oval to watch a trial match and sign the young Buderus. Here is where everything goes sideways. In the pre-digital era of rugby league recruitment, player identification often came down to jersey numbers and handwritten notes on a clipboard. During that trial, O'Sullivan watched a performance that impressed him deeply. Sharp passing, tough defense, the instincts of a future elite hooker. The Dragons offered a 2-year contract immediately after the match. The player who accepted it was not Danny Buderus. It was his teammate, Joel Kane. Kane was stunned by the offer. He later said he thought he had played poorly that day, but he took the contract, moved to Sydney, and started living with O'Sullivan, who was coaching the Dragons' Jersey Flegg side at the time. The problem became clear fast. Kane was struggling in training drills designed for a hooker. He had never played hooker in his life. The truth came out when O'Sullivan sat Kane down to watch the trial on videotape. He pointed to a player on the screen and praised his work. Good run, good pass, good tackle, he said, and Kane stopped. That player is not me, Kane said. That is Danny Buderus. By the time the Dragons processed what had happened, Buderus was already gone. Within a week, Keith Onslow, the legendary Newcastle Knights scout, had travelled to Terry and secured his signature. One mistake with a jersey number in a pre-digital world, and the entire future of the Knights changed forever. Buderus went on to play 257 first-grade games for the club, captain them for years, and become the cornerstone of the 2001 Premiership side. St George lost a generational player. Newcastle found a legend, all because someone wrote down the wrong name, number 6. When Danny Buderus arrived at the Knights, the hooker position was in the middle of a transformation. The game was speeding up. Buderus was not just part of that shift. He helped drive it. In a team built around the genius of Andrew Johns, Buderus was the engine. His dummy half service was quick and precise. He got the ball to the playmakers in milliseconds, and his speed away from the ruck forced defensive lines to stay honest. The gaps he created were the ones Johns and Matt Gidley turned into tries. He had the vision of a halfback in the body of a number 9, but it was his defensive approach that truly set him apart. Buderus was not a big man. There was no physical reason he should have been going head-on at forwards, who outweighed him by 30, 40, even 50 kilograms. But that is exactly what he did. Every single week, he threw himself at the chest and upper torso of charging props, trying to stop their momentum, ball and all. It was the kind of defensive courage that won him enormous respect throughout the game. Teammates talked about it, opponents respected it, coaches pointed to it as the standard they wanted from everyone else. It was also the kind of courage that was slowly destroying his spine. Every head-on collision, every tackle on a charging middle forward was adding pressure and wear to his neck and lower back. The injuries that would eventually define his final years were not bad luck. They were built, hit by hit, over 15 seasons. Number 5, for almost a decade, the judiciary barely knew Danny Buderus existed. He was the Australian captain, the NSW captain, a player celebrated for his discipline. And then came 2005. In a match against the North Queensland Cowboys, Buderus was involved in a spear tackle on Jonathan Thurston, future immortal, one of the most decorated players in the history of the game. The tackle earned Buderus a 2-match suspension, and it was the first genuine blemish on a record that had been nearly spotless for 10 years. The media ran with it hard. The Australian captain in front of the judiciary, the squeaky clean image under scrutiny for the first time. The 2005 season was one of the most demanding of his career. He was leading both the Knights and the Blues through rebuilding phases at the same time. The pressure was constant. The suspension was uncharacteristic. It went on his record, and it showed that even the most disciplined players in the competition are not immune to the speed and chaos of the game when the stakes are highest. Number 4. The very next year, Buderus was back before the judiciary. In a 2006 match against the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles, a tackle on Michael Robertson in the 76th minute appeared to put Robertson into a dangerous position. Buderus was looking at a suspension that could have ended his finals campaign entirely. His defense was built on 2 things. His overall record, which despite the 2005 suspension, was still among the cleanest in the competition, and the mechanics of his tackling style. He explained that his method involved going in low, targeting the knees, an approach similar to the technique used by Origin legend Trevor Gilmeister. The issue Buderus argued was physics. When a fast player like Robertson runs at full pace into a low tackle, the rotation and momentum can create the appearance of a dangerous lift even when no lift was ever intended. He expressed genuine remorse and stated clearly that his goal had always been to stop momentum, never to drive anyone's head into the ground. The judiciary took his case under consideration. His record and his explanation both mattered. Those 2 seasons in front of the judiciary were rare in a career defined by discipline. Once they were behind him, the record stayed clean, but the scrutiny had been real while it lasted. Number 3. The 2008 season is the most complicated chapter in the Danny Buderus story. By 2008, Buderus had given the Knights more than a decade of his life. He was the captain, the symbol of the club, the man the whole fan base connected with. But internal tensions with coach Brian Smith had reached a point of no return. Smith was restructuring the club from the ground up. Buderus found himself at odds with the coaching philosophy and the direction of the organisation. The relationship fell apart. Buderus signed with the Leeds Rhinos in the English Super League. For the Knights faithful, it was a gut punch. Their captain, the man who had led them through the best and worst years of the club's history, was walking out, and it was not entirely on his terms. Then came the decision that still draws debate. Kangaroos coach Ricky Stewart publicly announced that any player leaving the NRL for Super League would not be considered for the Australian national team. No exceptions. Buderus was the incumbent Australian captain. In form and at the peak of his experience, none of it mattered. He was excluded from the 2008 World Cup squad because of his impending move to Leeds. Critics argued then, and have continued to argue since, that a national team should always select its best available players regardless of contract status. For Buderus, it meant he was denied the right to retire from Test football on his own terms. It was a political call dressed up as a selection policy. The Australian hooker jersey was passed to Cameron Smith, who would hold it for the next decade. That is not a slight on what Smith became. But for Buderus, a door closed before he was ready to walk out of it. Number 2, as if the political fallout were not enough, his final weeks at the Knights also robbed him of a proper farewell. In late August 2008, in a match against the North Queensland Cowboys, Buderus ruptured his bicep, a torn tendon that required immediate surgery and 6 months of rehabilitation. The timing was brutal. The Knights had a traditional old boys' day at McDonald-Jones Stadium coming up. It was supposed to be his send-off, his last run in front of the fans who had followed him for over a decade. Instead, he went into surgery and missed it. He did perform a lap of honour in front of 15,000 people, but he described the experience as very overwhelming and hard to comprehend. He had not known during his last actual game that it was going to be his last game for the club. That awareness was taken from him by a freak injury. No player wants to end a chapter of their career that way. Number 1, he went to England and made it count. The Leeds Rhinos won the Super League Grand Final in 2011, and Buderus was part of it. He proved his game could translate, he proved his leadership travelled. Then in 2012, coach Wayne Bennett sent an SOS to bring him back to Newcastle. The club needed cultural leadership. They needed someone who understood what it meant to wear that jersey. Buderus came home, not for money or personal glory, because his club needed him, but his body had changed. The years of head-on collisions had accumulated past the point of easy recovery. In early 2013, before the season had even started properly, Buderus underwent 2 major back operations, just to maintain the ability to play. Bulging discs in his neck, bulging discs in his lower back. He played the entire 2013 season, managing chronic pain and serious inflammation. Real limiting, daily pain. He relied on the medical staff, on his extraordinary pain threshold, and on his refusal to leave his teammates without their leader. Bo Scott said publicly that Buderus was the number 1 person to the whole team. Everyone in that dressing room knew what it was costing him. The people in the stands did not. And then came the preliminary final, which brings everything back to where we started. Allianz Stadium, September 2013. 17 minutes in, 1 tackle. A career ending not in celebration, but on a stretcher with a neck brace and a night in hospital. In the years since that night, the collision between Buderus and Waerea-Hargreaves has been revisited repeatedly. Some fans watching the footage closely have argued that Waerea-Hargreaves used a raised elbow or made striking contact. That claim has circulated across social media and podcasts. But the official position from the match officials and from Roosters coach Trent Robinson was consistent. No malice. It was football. Buderus had his head in the wrong position. Robinson called it simply a game of footy. What that framing does not fully address is the structural reality of the collision. Buderus was approximately 90 kilograms going head-on at a prop of approximately 115 kilograms. That mismatch is not unusual in rugby league. What was unusual was that the man going into that tackle had bulging discs in his neck that had been treated just months earlier. The margin for error in that collision, always measured in millimeters, was even tighter because of what his body had already been through that same year. The tackling philosophy that had made Buderus a legend, the head-on courage that won him Test captaincy, and the respect of everyone in the game was also the philosophy that left him with almost no protection when the timing went fractionally wrong. The fallout from that hit contributed to the NRL's ongoing work around head contact rules and the protection of smaller defenders in physical mismatches. His career became part of that conversation, not because he sought it, but because it illustrated the cost of the game's demands better than almost any other story could. And when you lay it all out from beginning to end, this is exactly what you are left with. A 16-year-old who nearly signed for the wrong club because a scout wrote down the wrong jersey number. A hooker who rewired what the number 9 position could look like. A man who earned 2 suspensions in back-to-back seasons and stood before the judiciary and explained himself honestly both times. A captain frozen out of the World Cup by a selection policy he had no say in. A player who left under friction, won a Super League Grand Final, came back at his club's request, had 2 surgeries before his final season began, and gave his last 17 minutes of professional football to a head-on tackle on a Sydney night with a neck that had already been cut open that year. At every stage of his career, when it was hard, he showed up. Every controversy had context. Every flashpoint had a resolution. None of it changed who Danny Buderus was at the core. 257 NRL games, 21 State of Origin appearances, 24 tests for Australia, 15 games as NSW captain, a Super League title, an NRL premiership, a legacy built from Tari to the Hunter and back again. He did not get the farewell he deserved, But the standards he carried throughout his entire career, the loyalty, the courage, the willingness to sacrifice his body for his team, never changed from the day Keith Onslow found him in Taree to the moment the Medicab took him off the field in Sydney. That is who Danny Buderus is. That is the truth. His story deserves to be remembered in full, not just as a highlight reel, but as the complete picture of what a genuine rugby league leader looks like. If you think his career deserved more recognition than it ever received, drop a comment below and tell us what his legacy meant to you. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves this game and needs to know the real story behind one of the greatest leaders the NRL has ever produced.